This upcoming concert season will be all about the boots, and Tecovas is your stop for the best in Western style. Tecovas has seasonal and limited edition offerings this spring and summer, including men's and women's boots, apparel, hats, bags, and more. All Tecovas boots are made by hand in a time-honored tradition with timeless styles that are always on trend. And Tecovas has first wear comfort with little to no break-in period. It's hard to find this level of comfort paired with this level of style. Stop by your local Tecovas store, have a complimentary drink or two, that's WCB style, and shop new styles. The smell of fresh leather and friendly staff are at your service. Many stores even have leather custom branding to make your boots truly personalized. And with regular live music and events, there's no in-store experience like it. If you can't make it into a store, just visit tecovas.com. That's TECOVAS.com. They offer free shipping on all boots, as well as free returns and exchanges, and ship right to your door. Go to tecovas.com and find your new favorite pair of boots today.
Fishing like a local isn't just about catching fish. It's about connecting with the environment and the people who call it home. It's about hearing the stories and traditions that have been passed down for generations and sharing unforgettable moments with the people you meet along the way. Fishing like a local is having an experience that stays with you forever. And with Fishing Booker, you can experience it too, no matter where you are. Discover your next adventure on Fishing Booker.
If you hunt enough, you learn the truth. What you seek speaks a language and knows it well. That's why every Primo's call for everything you hunt is made the right way. We sweat every detail so you get more out of every hunt, and nothing leaves our hand until we know it'll work in yours. Because we don't just make the world's best calls, we speak the language. Primos.
At Midway USA, we know the AR-15 is one of the most popular rifles in modern American history. Known for its modularity and widespread use, it's often considered essential to any gun collection. The essential things you need to run an AR-15 are usually always in stock during shortages, things like magazines and 5.56 ammo. Whether you're looking to buy a new AR-15 or buy parts for your modern sporting rifle, log on and for just about everything for the outdoors, shop MidwayUSA.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast, brought to you by Huntworth. Huntworth gear for all types of weather, all types of terrain, all types of budgets. It's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. So I just got a couple new pairs of the Durham pants for my spring bear hunt, and really digging those pants. I like them. They're super comfortable and super durable. I've had the one pair that I have right now that I've had them for, I want to say like 2 or 3 years now, and they're just a little bit too grubby to wear out in public. So I still use them for hunting, still use them for all that, but the solid color ones you can wear out just kind of like regular pants. So really excited to get a couple more pairs of that. Real excited to get out to Montana, do some spring bear hunting next week. And but for those of you not spring bear hunting, for those of you who aren't into turkey hunting, you're not getting ready for tack, what are you doing right now? And that's the basis of this podcast. We're talking to David Riley, who is a 100% whitetail guy. I think he just breathes, eats, sleeps whitetail. And he is one of these guys that I wanted to pick his brain and figure out, because I know all year round he's scouting, he's glassing, and I want to know what he's doing right now and through the summer months. So we got him on this podcast to kind of maybe motivate some guys, move them into that whitetail mindset when they're trying to figure out what they should be doing right now. But speaking of tack, I got to announce our Tailgate Ready Challenge winner. Man, I don't know how to say his last name. Matt Subcheck, I believe is how you say it, something like that. Weekend Warrior Hunting on Instagram. He won the Tailgate Ready Challenge. I put him in touch with Brian over at Zinger and Canati, so he's got a set of their arrows coming, a little bit of tutorial from Travis, as well as he is going to be at the Michigan Tack, so he will get 11 shots at the truck at the caribou for the truck, and should be all set. Real excited about that. So it's going to be a great time. But between now and then, I got a bear hunt. I've been shooting pretty well, actually. Got my D-loop redone, if you guys saw that. But anyways, we can't thank those guys enough. And John, he's been shooting those bows, getting everything dialed in. Can't wait to share that. And really excited, so thankful for ABB and Redline for getting us hooked up with that, and also Grand Valley Outdoors with helping us out with that bear bow, and then Johnson's Outdoors with the lift. So if you guys get a chance, if you're going to go need some bow work done before tack, check those guys out. But yeah, so Zinger, Canati, can't thank those guys enough. Huntworth, obviously, everybody that supports the show. We're going out to Montana for bear to be with some of the Patreons. That's our Patreon Hunt West bear hunt, so that's going to be freaking awesome. Patreon's like crazy staying with us at TAC. Just we can't thank you guys enough, and for building this community and helping us out. Genesis 3D, Latitude, all those guys, Big Shot Targets. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for supporting the show. If you want to become part of the community, if you want to help us out, if you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/Bowhunter Chronicles podcast, or click the link in our description on Instagram, and it'll send you right over there. But, thank you guys so much. I know you're going to get a lot out of this episode, and David's going to be up at TAC, so you can pick his brain on anything that you hear on this podcast. As always, thanks for listening. All right, everybody. Adam back with another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. And the last time I had this guy on here, he was the co-host of the Fall podcast. And I'm pretty sure he's still doing that. But now he is the host of the Method podcast from Latitude. And you could almost see that in the last podcast where he was spinning it on me and saying, okay, well, I need to ask you some questions, and he's going to take the seat. And that's the funnest part about doing this with guys who are comfortable talking is, you can have these really good two-way conversations. And obviously the guy I'm talking about today is David Riley, DJ Riley, the guys call him. So how are you doing today, David?
Dude, I'm doing good, man. It's we're kind of, the day we record this, we're in the middle of May. Weather's changing. I mean, looking ahead at this weekend, it's going to be in the 80s. But I tell you what, Adam, I love this time of year because, the trees have leaves, the grass is looking good, and fields are being planted. I'm not too sure over by you, but I can tell you, like around me, the farmers are planting like crazy right now. And the fields look so good, right? Like when they get it all worked up, and I'm seeing a lot of corn going in the ground around here, a lot of corn going in the ground. So everything's looking real good, man. But how are you doing?
Good. And it's funny that you'd say that because one of the things that I don't see you doing is anything else other than whitetails, right? And so yesterday I'm out, and I don't even, and that's why I'm really excited to have this conversation, is yesterday I'm out going to take my daughter turkey hunting. Like she's like literally gets out of school, go home, change her clothes. And we got this farm that my buddy's got, and we're going to go turkey hunt. And we've been out there 2 times already this year. Saw some turkeys, heard some gobbles, had some hens right in on the decoys, and we're sitting in a hunting shack. And so we're going to bring a pop-up blind out there. We're going to go and set it up, and like almost exactly where we were going to set up, or right there where the turkeys normally are, where they were 2 days ago, like heading right to the roost. They're working the field. So the farmer's out there, tractors going by, all that stuff. So we had to call audible. And then this is kind of, I didn't realize it was going to play so well into this podcast. So then I asked my daughter, like, what do you want to do? And she's like, I don't know. What do you think? And I said, well, let's go try some public. So I got an 8-year-old girl that I'm bringing out in public. We've got no camo whatsoever. I'm carrying the whole Cabela's on my back because we're going to get set up in this blind, go in there. And what happens on public every single time? Like we go, there's a truck right where we were going to be. And then that truck goes away. They go to the end of the road. We glass out in the field. There's turkeys out there. So I'm like, trying to figure out what we're going to do. we're not wearing camo because we were set up to hunt out of this blind. And then we see these guys kind of make a move, and I'm like, I think they're going to do what we would do. So let's go over to this other spot. We start walking. It's hot. Like you said, it's super hot. And just get out there. And she's like, well, we got to sit down. And I'm like, well, let's just go up here a little further and we'll find a spot in the shade and we'll just sit down. I'm like, I'm not setting up the tent because I don't think this is a great spot, but we can get in the shade. We can call, we can kind of get an idea. And I kid you not, as soon as we got set up and we were behind a berm, so we had some cover. I barely scratched the call, and then there's hens right behind us. And then I end up having this gobbler just hammering out in front of us for an hour. And I'm sure he saw us because she was moving around. She's, she had a mask on, but she's got blonde hair, little kid moving around like crazy. But just the experience, man, it was freaking awesome. But I think it's just like that mindset of trying to figure out how to navigate this thing with a little kid, but we weren't, I'm like, do you want to wear, we should probably put some pants on, not shorts. And she's like, wow, we're going to be sitting in the blind, and no, we're out there just hunkered up behind this berm with birds hammering right in front of us, and just couldn't make it happen. But she was super excited. It's fun, but that's, what we're doing this year. Whereas I feel like guys like yourself are looking at what's going in the ground or what's going on, because it's the David Riley, follow along with him. It's whitetail all the time. There is no turkey hunting. There is no, so for you, when you're talking about looking at those farm fields, watching all of that stuff, that's, I kind of want to go through your whitetail timeline on, what a guy who I would say is serious or infatuated with whitetails is doing this time of year.
Yeah. Well, first off, taking a kid turkey hunting, Adam, I think that's such a great opportunity to get kids out there. I can remember taking both of my daughters, and, my oldest daughter, she's 16 now. And I can remember taking her at the age of 8 years old, like you're talking about your daughter. And it's so the nice thing about turkey hunting with kids, it's you get nice weather this time of year. It's pretty enjoyable, but it's also, it has its struggles, right?
Hunting boots are a critical component of any successful hunt. Whether walking a short distance to your blind or trudging miles through rugged terrain, your feet are carrying the load. Without the right boots, you could give up early and lose out on that trophy just over the ridge. At Midway USA, we make selecting boots for your next hunt easier. With just a few clicks of a mouse, you can decide on what's important, like waterproofing, insulation, size, width, and savings. For just about everything for shooting, hunting, and the outdoors, check out MidwayUSA.com. The 1911 is one of the most iconic firearms in history. Designed by John Browning, the 1911 was the standard issue sidearm of the U.S. military from 1911 to 1985. While Colt produced the original, almost every major firearm company has produced its own version. It's wildly revered for its reliability, crisp trigger, and is still a favorite for all types of shooters. Whether you're looking to buy or build a 1911 and just about everything for guns, log on to MidwayUSA.com.
That hunt you're talking about, they're being super vocal, so that keeps them in the game. But it could have been the opposite. What's cool about that story is that you guys, you faced one issue, had the farmer. Phase 2, the second issue, had the other truck, but still pushed on. And even though maybe no shots were fired, you guys still put yourself in a situation to have an encounter. So it's that was probably a really, really good learning lesson for her. When you were telling me that story, it was because that's hunting, right, Adam? You run into obstacles and things can still happen out there. So I just wanted to hit on that. But right now for me, Adam, is we're a lot of people, and me included, years and years ago, I used to scout a lot January, February, March, and then I would kind of turn it off, right? Because everything we've read, let me actually back up a little bit. When we were younger, we always read about don't go into these areas, don't bother sanctuaries, don't do this, hunt like this. Eventually, I had seen that the guys that were having success were kind of doing the opposite of what those articles would say back in the day. So I changed what I did. But then when I started to scout a lot in the off season, I seen a lot of people talk about, well, once you got to scout before green up, and rightfully so. There's so much information to be had right there, and it's so easy to see at that time of year. And that's what I was doing. I was laying off. I kind of would take that first quarter of the year, January, February, March, and really hammer it. And then I'd turn it off like a light switch, kind of, you know, April, May, and June. And then I'd kind of get into trail cameras in July. But I find myself just sitting there, or like sitting around, like just doing house projects, which need to be done too. But I've couple of years ago, I was just like, I'm going to continue my scouting. I just have to readjust it though. I have to, adapt to the green up. And what I would do, Adam, honestly, as soon as things were starting to green up, there was multiple things I could do. One, like I like having a lot of things prepared for the areas that I know really, really well. I would prepare trees just for trail cameras that I knew I would be visiting in July and August, like preparing those trees. Like I would take days to go do that just so when the dog days of summer are here, the mosquitoes are terrible, poison ivy is as thick as it gets. All I have to go do in the middle of summer or at the end of summer is go in there, drop that trail camera and get out of there. And that was one thing I could do. But I think the major thing that I find myself doing once it's greened up right now, this time of year, is I'm just kind of learning the way of the land. And that's mainly really focused towards newer areas that I don't know well. Because in my mind, what makes a guy really, really deadly at mobile hunting is if it's October 9th, Adam, and I set up, but I'm just off, and I see a deer kind of slipping through the swamp, that I don't have to know every little thing about that swamp if it's a new piece to me, but if I know how that swamp, how it flows, how the vegetation edges are around that swamp, then I can have a good idea of how I need to adjust. So it may not be, you know, micro details once it greens up, but I can just learn the way of the land, how things flow, where I maybe need to move to if that time comes up in during hunting season. And then when it comes to like what you talked about, that crop rotation, I try to be as so patient as I can. I'm doing really good so far this year. I'm 2 weeks in and I haven't talked to a single farmer yet because I want it as soon as I'm seeing farmers out planting, and if they're anywhere in, adjacent square miles to where I can hunt or around the public land or private land pieces, I want to know so bad because I've kept log of crop rotations. And I've learned this in the past where, like, for example, 2 years ago, I had this permission piece of this woodlot, and I kind of overlooked it. And that particular year, it was surrounded by corn. And I was chasing a different deer, and I kind of never made my way into there. And one day I was in town, I was talking to a guy that lived local to there, and he was telling me he's like, man, I seen a really big deer cross the road and right in this area. And once he told me that, I knew where that deer had to be going. And after season, I go in there and I look at it and I was like, yeah, I messed up. I should have at least went in there and checked that. And I just refer that back to that woodlot was surrounded by corn that year. So I put that in my notes, and I've been waiting and watching for that to happen again. And if I've been watching the farmers right, this is a ways from my house, but if I've been watching the farmers right over there, it looks like it may be surrounded by corn again. So now I know, like, hey, that's something I need to be paying attention to. But that's that's a lot of what I'm doing right now, man. I just don't stop walking. That's usually the case. To me, I believe I always have something that I can do. Maybe go find a new piece of ground, prep a tree, check crops, just whatever. And right now, here's another good thing. They're working all this ground up, and it's kind of loose ground. But if you're looking for like a big deer in an area, you're trying to figure out if one survived, it's a great time to go cut a track right now. Like, yeah, we can't tell what they have on top of their head, but boy, the tracks in the new the plowed up farm fields, yeah, they stick out like a sore thumb right now.
So, and it's great for me because all of this is very self-serving, right? Because I get to sit down and have these conversations, as do you, with all the killers that you're talking to.
Mhm.
And so when you say I'm going to go walk and I'm going to go learn this land, and I think myself and other guys have this problem where, like, I'm a terrible shed hunter because I'm like, ooh, look at that, a rub, ooh, a scrape, ooh, here's a runway, I got to follow the runway, instead of like taking my time and being like, okay, here's where here's where he was feeding, so maybe there's a shed over here, something like that. And now you're going in after this green up, so you're walking around on these places just to get the lay of the land. But if you've I guess if you were to look back over the last 5 years of just walking around with me, there's either two things that I do, and I don't know if this is like how you're doing it or what. So that's why I'm asking the question this way, is I go in and I'll follow runways.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel like that's kind of like what everybody else does too. So you're just kind of walking along where the deer are, or I've been on the maps and I'm like, oh, I want to check the spot. And I get into the thickest, nastiest stuff in the world. And maybe I find like, oh, this is a great spot, but there's zero chance that I'll ever get back there because I know for 100% certainty I'll never get back here in the dark. And you're surrounded by all the brush and all the stuff. And then, you're like, what am I even doing in here? Or, you're up to your waist in water or muck and you're stuck back there. So when you're walking in, like, how are you going about it from the time when you're at home saying, okay, I'm going to go to this place today? And we just got finished with a podcast with Greg Litzinger where I took a lot away from that, where he said, whether you're on the range or you're going out scouting, you need to have a purpose that day to say, I'm going to this spot for this reason. So how are you breaking that down from the time you decide after work, I'm going here? How are you doing that? What are you doing? What are you looking for ahead of time?
Yeah. So this will be a great example. Let's say I'm going after work and I have 2 hours. Because honestly, Adam, that's a lot of my scouting is, somebody may say, man, you're scouting like 3 or 4 days a week, but they're short little windows. So, having a purpose, like what Greg speaks about, that is so important to me, because with short windows, like I can't go out and just, walk wherever and not have a purpose at all, because I'm not going to get anything done. So what I try to do is I kind of break up, even if it's a giant section of, say, public land. What if it's 7 or 8,000 acres? I don't look at it like that.
Are you overwhelmed by the hundreds of food plot mixes out there? Well, you are not alone. And Vitalize Seed has developed a program that takes the guesswork out of food plotting. Vitalize makes it simple with their 2 core mixes, Nitro Boost and Carbon Load. Nitro Boost is their spring-summer food plot mix, and Carbon Load is for planting in the fall, each having a diverse mix of over a dozen seed types that are highly attractive to whitetail. Food plotting made simple. Each mix provides necessary nutrients to the soil, making for better plots each season. This also saves you money by needing less Roundup and fertilizer every year. The 1-2 system simplifies your food plots just how nature intended. And for the more advanced habitat managers, Vitalize also offers a variety of natural amendments with products like their seed feed that offer seeds immediately available minerals ready as soon as they germinate. Make biology work for you. Order now at vitalizeseed.com.
I look at it as like I'm trying to find that right acre inside of that ground. But what I may take is, let's say I hunt a lot of swamp country. That's a lot of what I do here in Michigan. And if I have this swamp country, I can usually pick apart that map on a map, I can pick apart where that swamp is. Okay. And let's say I have 2 hours on Tuesday, and then I have 2 hours on Friday. And let's just give an example of the swamp is, I don't know, let's call it the swamp, 60-acre swamp. Well, what I'll do is I'll kind of look at it that it has four edges. We'll just call it picture like a rectangle that swamp is. Well, day one, I'll take my 2 hours and I'll cover two edges. Let's say I'll cover the west edge and then the south edge of the swamp. And I'm going to do a little bit of what you were talking about, Ed. I'm going to walk those trails. But what I'm really, really looking to do, because in the swamp country here, I'm going to have a parallel trail just outside that swamp, and I'm probably going to have one inside that swamp. But what I'm looking for is I'm looking for those junctions in the trails. And when I talk about a junction, I'm talking about, let's say on that west side of that swamp. Okay, there's a north-south trail on the inside of the swamp, and there's a north-south trail on the outside of the swamp. Well, I'm looking for those trails that are running east and west, kind of crossing those, or if I can get two or three of those multiple things coming together. That's a big thing on those edges of those swamps. So I don't technically have to go into those swamps at this time of year, Adam. One, because like you said, they're going to be thick and nasty now. And I'm just going to designate that. Like, I don't exactly have to know where every little bed is in that swamp. I'm going to treat this swamp as a bedding area, not a single bed. This is when I got a lot better at the Michigan swamp, is when I stopped trying to do just the one bed thing and treated it as a whole bedding area. So I'm I'm looking for these junctions on the outside there. And I'll know that there's bucks in there, and there should be bucks in there all time of year. The water level is going to change, and that is something that I'd be paying attention to big time right now, because it's going to be, if the water level is really high, and if we just keep kind of steady rain through the summer, that's probably what it's going to look like for me in the fall also. So you have those junctions right outside the bedding area, and maybe I cover two sides of it. Okay. The next day, I'm available to go out and scout. Maybe I'll cover the north side and the east side, because I already did the west side and the south side. And maybe one day's better than the other, or maybe they're both good. I don't know. But you also have to think about like your prevailing winds. So I'm probably gonna guess that there's gonna be two sides that will most likely be better than the other two. But now I spent 2 days scouting, and I'm not picking apart, the fine details yet. But now after those 2 days, I have a general idea of maybe what that's like. And I can return for a third day. And then I can really start diving into, okay, I found this junction here. Let's break that junction down a little bit more. I do that a lot. And especially I'm starting, like, every year I find myself wanting to just walk more and more new ground. And over the years, I found myself like really, really wanting to know every little single detail about a place in the off season. Where now it's kind of shifted from that, is like, if I have a general idea of the area, just put me in there and let me start hunting and if I can have 3 or 4 days to hunt at a time, if I can get a sighting on like day 1 or 2, I should be able to kill them by day 3 or 4 in there, because I have a general idea of those edges of outside that bedding area, that swamp that I first ever found on a map. And what I like to, my favorite thing outside these bedding areas, Adam, is you get the junctions of trails, but then you have multiple edges come together. I mean, if you could have, that swamp right there, the swamp edge, that's one edge. Then you may have, I don't know, what if you have a like a hardwoods edge kind of comes in there too, and then you have, I don't know, maybe a cattail marsh comes off right there, like a T. Then we have multiple edges coming together, and that is my favorite. To me, I don't care where you're at in the country. If you can have an area, and it doesn't have to be a swamp, It could be, CRP or a ditch or a creek or a pine thicket or cedars. I don't care. If you give me an area, I'm always attracted to areas that multiple things come together. So that is also something that I'm looking for, even during green up, because we can picture this now. All the leaves are on the trees now. What was once, we love that January, February, March when the woods was so visible, you could see everything so well. Well, now with vegetation, I can see these hard lines even better now.
So outside of the edges and the junctions of these runways or trails coming together, what is something that keeps you coming back where you're like, oh, I have to dive into this further? Or what is an example of something that you would say, well, now I can abandon this or check this off of the list when you're looking at new ground?
Yeah, so to abandon a piece is usually for me here in Michigan, and this isn't always because I ended up I killed a deer a few years back on a piece that if I took you to, Adam, I would say this kind of area, I'm marking off the map right away. It's too wide open. It's not any good. But it was an area like I dropped a camera in just to see, because I was like, if I can get permission on a piece of property, like I feel like I should at least owe it a trail camera who knows? And that's exactly what happened down there but for years I would say if I can see all the way through it, if I can see more than like 60, 70 yards, I'm usually crossing that off. Like it's too wide open for me for what I've seen here in Michigan. So, but areas that really attract me to go back to, there's one thing. There's one thing that absolutely it's a no-brainer for me to go back to, and I'll save that to the end. Obviously sign, right? Like you get that, real nice big rub, or even maybe if it's not a big rub, maybe it's a real tall rub. I love finding when I'm hunting these swamp crowns, there's always water in them. And I'm watching when, these trails exiting these swamps, Adam, there's always mud, swamp water splashed on top of them, or on top of like the vegetation, but on like the side of like the saplings and trees. Well, those big deer, they stand taller, and sometimes you can visibly see mud on the edge, on the side of saplings or bushes. And there's times when you look at the height of it and you're like, ooh, that seems pretty tall. Like like a year and a half old deer, they're not bringing their leg up like that. And also those big deer weigh more and they're sinking themselves into the swamps more. Because I've seen it with trail cam pictures where like they're all the way up to like the middle of their leg is just pitch black from the swamps. If you see, maybe you'll find this is where, like, when I talk about the junctions, this is where I like to find scrapes. If I don't find them, I'll build them. But let's say I found a scrape in a junction, big, tall, like a tall scrape, like that licking branch is at like head level, if not above. And you're looking at that licking branch, but then you notice there was supposed to be other branches over here, but they're busted off. Like that's got my attention. Like that might get me coming back. Another thing that I've kind of learned over the years to kind of adjust with, before, if I got into an area and I was looking at, say, these junctions outside these swamps, if there was old sign, old buck rubs there, a lot of times I thought, oh, he's dead, or he's moved off, he wasn't here this last year. But I've actually adjusted my thought process on that a little bit. I'm paying attention to, like we talked about earlier, Adam, the crop rotation and acorn rotation. Okay. So I'm going to give an example here. Let's say this last just couple months, or even right now, I'm scouting an area and I come into an area. You can see the swamp, there's got to be probably some good bedding in there. And you just outside that swamp, just outside that buffer zone where they feel safe. and I see 8 rubs, and they're really good rubs, but they're all old. I can tell these aren't 2023 rubs. These are probably 2022 rubs. Years ago, I used to always think he's dead, he's gone, he's not here anymore because these were not from last year. And sometimes that's the case. Probably a lot of times that's the case. But I've been watching this now. Is it were those food-based rubs outside that bedding area? Were those rubs there because there was an acorn tree just outside that swamp that was dropping back in 2022, but it didn't drop in 23? Because here's the thing, if it didn't drop in 23, I may be in the chips in that spot in 2024. If not 2024, maybe in 2025. So I don't always get, I used to maybe run away from an area that had old rubs, but now I find myself attracted to those areas because I'm like, well, it wasn't good last year, but it was good the years prior for a reason. I had to figure that reason out. But the number one thing that will always keep me coming back for more, always, and it doesn't matter the time of year, is just cutting a big track, leaving that swamp or going right back into it. You know, I'm sure you've walked a lot of swamp ground. The thing is about green up and swamp ground, there's no green up on swamp trails. It doesn't happen. You know, either they're full of water, and if they're not full of water, they're just muddy. They stick out like a sore thumb. You know, like I actually think that sometimes there's trails in swamp country that stick out more during green up than they did all winter long, you know, because now it's like you got, you know, green, just and then just mud. But those big tracks and those trails, you got to be careful because it's like I said, that it's mud, so they can be exaggerated a little bit. But that right there, Adam, you give me a big track, like that's as good as getting his picture. I've heard guys say that, and I couldn't agree more with them there.
So outside of because like you just said, those trails, they're always wet and they're always muddy and they always look fresh. So outside of the mud or muck on the vegetation around there, what are you doing to like age those tracks or anything like that? Maybe that gets more to like the in-season scouting. But that's like the most deceiving thing because it's not like a track in the snow or on a dusty 2-track where you can say, oh, that was from this morning. I can still see that it's wet inside of there. In the swamp, in that black mud, they always look fresh and it always gets you excited.
Yeah. And you're not wrong. I tell you this is very situational, and you almost have to be right on his ass for this to work. If you cut a track, and if he's like heading into the swamp, and if you're questioning, you're like, man, that looks really fresh. If you can push any closer to where it's actually has standing water, okay, when that whitetail sticks his hoof down in that swamp water and into that muck and pulls it out, there's going to be these little oxygen bubbles on top. Like you can track deer in the swamp from those bubbles. I've done it. I've tracked deer that I've shot where it's like they're not, you know, they're just laying blood down on top of that water, but you can actually follow. It's like a boat, you know, when a boat goes through the water and you can see right kind of where the ripples were in the wake of that boat. Deer will do that too in the swamp. But the one thing for me about the tracks, like you talked about, is one, if they're in sun or not, because if they're in sun, they'll dry up pretty good. Like if you got just a little pocket in the branch of the head where the sun's coming down, they'll dry up a little bit. But what I'm really looking for is, so when they take that step into that muddy trail and they pull their hoof out, it's usually always dropping some kind of mud or water. And even if it's on the same trail, there'll be like these little like mud balls that kind of come off their hoof, and those will dry up fast. And you can almost kind of look at those little pieces and tell how recent he's been through there. And also, like, how we talked about, their hoofs are always covered in that black swamp water and mud. Be watching how dry is that stuff on the leaves or the vegetation that's tight against that trail. Usually it's, I don't even know, it's like swamp grass or like a red brush or whatever they're brushing up against. It's those little things that's telling me more of how old that track may be that I'm looking at.
And so in these scenarios like this,
Whether you're just looking to stay warm during a hunt or need maximum concealment, the clothing you wear can make or break a hunt. At MidwayUSA.com, we understand hunting clothing has come a long way with more meticulously crafted camo patterns, advanced scent control technologies, and weatherproof options to withstand the elements. Hunters have to wait until their favorite season, but shouldn't wait on gear, which is why Midway USA offers super fast shipping. When you're ready for your next system, log on to MidwayUSA.com. Midway USA brand product designers have one straightforward goal: develop high-quality, technically sound products and deliver them to customers at reasonable prices. If you are immersed in the shooting sports industry and pay close attention to every single detail, you know our products are built right and stand up to everyday use. Who has shooting mats and range bag systems to hunting clothing and just about everything for the outdoors? Log on and shop 24/7 with super fast shipping. MidwayUSA.com.
I guess, what are you finding for human sign, hunter sign, and how much does that deter you from an area?
And that's such a great question, because I hear a lot of guys talk about, like they run into boot tracks, and I do too, man. I mean, it's in today's world, it just seems like it's gonna happen, right? Like there's very, very few places, like, here in southern Michigan, for anyone that's listening, most everything we have is kind of broke up into square miles, right? Like you're always going to run to a road somewhere, so nothing ever feels like it's out of the reach to be able to walk to. Usually the divider is how nasty the swamp is, or just how thick it is. And there'll be times I'm out there in the postseason scouting, and it's like, holy shit, there's a boot track here. And like you said, like you're looking at that boot track going, dude, they were out here this week. Like you can tell. But and I don't even know if this is the right idea, but this is just kind of what I do. I've gotten to the point here in Michigan that if I find a good spot, like I don't ever think about if somebody else is going to be there. If I get there, Adam, and somebody beat me to it, good for you, man. You found it too. Because whether I've seen boot tracks or old tree stands, or, I can tell like there's old screw-in steps, even if it's on public land or whatever the case may be. If I treated all of some of my best areas, if I treated them like, oh, I think that looks like somebody's hunted here before. Hell, I don't think I'd have anywhere to hunt here in Michigan. I don't, that's just the way I look at it. Like, say for instance, when you talked about that truck in that parking lot, during scouting season, like that doesn't detour me at all. Like if I had one this year, the most amount of vehicles I seen in one parking lot this year, I pulled in, there was 9 in there. And I thought about it, like, I'm like, man, there's 9 people in here. It's a freaking Tuesday in February and there's 9 people here. But I still went and I never seen a single soul. So maybe they just are walking different areas than what I'm walking. But I don't, even when I pull up in the parking lot and if I see vehicles, I don't think about like, oh man, I hope they're not I hope they're not in my spot. If I get back there and they're there, they can have it. They beat me to it, but I try not to let that bother me at all. And even out of state, like you're going to see guys park, and I don't know what the likelihood is. A lot of these swamps I hunt are so big at them I mean, for me to ever run into like a person right in an exact area, I man, I think it's so slim. I've been bow hunting a long time, and I can only remember one instance. Got way back in the dark and just about there, and I could just see that headlight or headlamp up in a tree. And I said, "Son of a bitch, he beat me out here already."
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I feel like if you hunt public land long enough, or if you maybe if you just hunt enough, like
Mhm.
I've ran into guys, I feel like in every single state that I've been to. And I guess I didn't technically run into anybody in Kansas, but I didn't hunt for very long either.
Mhm.
But it's, I don't know. I just wondered because, you're putting in a lot of time, you're talking about, and, I've done it, but I think like with less of a purpose. You're talking about putting in time on these areas, multiple days, multiple year over year. Um, and I just didn't know, like, when you showed up to a new spot, like if any of that mattered.
Yeah, no, like for example, I actually spent the in 2024 so far. I'm actually looking at my notes, my logbook. I've spent more time walking new ground this year than I walked ground that I know about already. Like I've hunted, and I just like I said earlier, like I'm just craving always walking new ground, like the unknown. Like what can I find as a new spot? And it's what I see a lot of times is when I come across, say, another guy's tree stand, most like 99% of the time I'm looking at, I'm like, yeah, it's, I'm walking by it to go get somewhere else I want to go. You know what I mean? But I also, I'm not picking out like real tiny, like if I'm out, headed to public land, like I said, you look at these giant areas. I'm just looking for one really good acre inside those kind of things. But I uh I don't know, I just keep an open mind about it. I guess I don't I think if I let it bother me a lot, then I probably wouldn't even go because it's like you're gonna see vehicles. I mean, even the private permission stuff I have, Adam, I don't have sole permission on anything. I know I got one property in Michigan over the last four or not 4 years, 4 5. Yeah, about 4 or 5 years ago, I counted 14 trucks there one time on a piece of private ground. You know what I mean? It's not even that big, and it's like, oh my gosh, guys.
So you kind of, something I didn't even think about, but I think we have to go into now is that logbook, right? So how is that structured? Because I think anytime I try to keep notes, I mean, even with my pins, like I'm terrible at it. So like I look at it and it just says pin 1 and it's a different color. And I'm like, why was I here? What did I think this was important? Was this when I was e-scouting? Was this when I was doing it? So doing an actual logbook and notes, what is the structure of your notes and how do you use that year over year?
Yeah, so that's actually kind of been pretty new to me, honestly, because I was, kind of like you, like I would just drop pins, man. I would, oh my gosh, if I'm sitting here at home or we're at a dance competition and I got some downtime, I'm just dropping pins, and then when it's time to go scout, I'm like, "Ooh, where should I go?" I've kind of changed that mindset, and even going out of state, like you, going out of state's terrible because it's like you have so much time before that trip ever comes along, and then all of a sudden that trip's here, and you're like, okay, I have 67 pins. I don't know where I should go today. Or now it's like just I'll drop a pin in an area that has interest, and then I'll just like I said, it's like I don't try to boil the ocean right away. Like I'm just trying to boil a pot of water each time I go out there, trying to find something hot, right? And so with the notes kind of got better for me, honestly, Adam, when I started carrying this freaking GoPro around. And I don't even know why I do it. I carry it with me. It's funny because I'll film myself talking about something I found. And what I like to do is I like to come back and I like to have like my mapping app open and then I can watch the video, because I'll talk to myself or talk to the video and then I'll like kind of pan and show everything I'm talking about. And then I'm like looking back at the map and going, holy cow, that makes a lot more sense than just looking at the map. You know what I mean? And what's always funny is those spots always seem to be areas that the map doesn't it doesn't glow on a map, right? And so I basically just have this notebook and like all these notes in my phone of like I plan ahead, like I have these planned scouting days. Like I know like, okay, I'm going to get 3 hours today. I'm going to go walk this brand new piece. I'm going to walk this west edge of this giant cattail swamp today. And I'll even plan out where it's like I don't like walking over things twice unless they're really good. So I'm like, okay, I'll start at the south end. I'm going to work my way north on this west edge, and I'm going to make kind of a loop kind of thing. And when I get back, I'm always taking that video. What I like to do, I think it's really important, is I delete pins once I get back, because when I'm dropping them out there, just because I'm dropping them when I get back, I'm looking at the map, looking at the video. I don't want a bunch of pins, and there'll be ones where it's like, okay, that's like a lesser quality pin, probably. Like that probably wasn't that important now that I'm seeing the grand scheme of things. And that's just kind of how I'm keeping those notes. And in those notes, what I'll do from scouting is, and I think this is the hardest part of this whole bow hunting bucks thing for me. This right here is getting the timing right. And so when I'm scouting and I get back and I'm making these notes, I'm putting in there an idea of when I think I need to be in there, like a time frame. Because I've talked about it quite a bit with other guys before, is that I really, really believe in time windows with whitetails. 3 to 5, the 3 to 6 day windows. I think areas heat up like that. And I'm, those areas may be that scrape on that junction on that west side of that swamp, just like I was talking about earlier. But figuring out those windows, man, holy cow, that is so tough. But what's funny is I'll go back and look at these notes, and boy, most of the time that in the beginning, my time windows were way off, because what happens is if it's a good enough spot where it's kind of got my attention, like you asked earlier, that is where I love to drop just an old school regular SD card trail camera and let it sit for that fall. Because then in that off season, that next January and February, if I'm pulling that camera, I can go back to those pictures and then I can start writing those 3 to 5 day windows when that area heats up with what I wrote down from my scouting notes. Okay. And it doesn't just have to be a specific buck. That happens. It definitely does. That historical data about a buck, that there's no doubt it happens. But what I'm really kind of looking for to put in my notes from that trail camera information is that historical data on that location itself. And I think those locations heat up. There's multiple reasons. Obviously, food, right? Food pressure. But what I like to watch a lot is the does. Because that's why I think there's 3 to 5 day windows with bucks at certain times of years, because of what's happening with the doe groups in there. But that's kind of, I mean, it's kind of it's not well kept, right? Like I've heard guys that have really, really well kept journals. That I'm not that good. I'm that, like, I do really good with it scouting, but then like come hunting season, it'll be like at the end of the week, I'm kind of like logging. But I've always done a really good job saving it in the old memory bank. And I know that's going to catch up to me sooner or later, Adam. It's going to. I know it's going to, or it's going to be, gosh dang, because that's honestly my playbook is I want to have I want to have all these kind of little spots like I'm talking about, and I'm trying to have enough where I know each window throughout, every 3 to 5 days of hunting season. I want these little areas that I know about. They're heating up. This one's heating up over here. Okay, I didn't kill October 1 through 5 here. Now I need to go hit my next one. That's, October 6th through the 9th. This one should be heating up. But that's taken a long time to gather a lot of information like that.
So I'm going to throw you a curveball here because I feel like where there are a large portion of our listeners that can at least have some information to draw from, like whether they've been keeping notes or they have it in their memory bank. And man, I could go on and on about this, but I think that memory bank is a double-edged sword, because that makes it convenient for us to go here or there because we know it's a good spot. Maybe it's not the right exact window, but I've seen deer there at this time of year anyway, so I'm going to go there. And you sound very much like a mini, maybe the same level, Andy May, Dan Infalt type of the amount of spots, the amount of history, and the approach that you take with these deer. Now, let's just pretend that David, now his daughters are grown and they decide that they're no longer Wolverine fans and they're moving. They're going to go to Penn State, and they move to Pennsylvania, and mom and dad have such a great relationship. They have to go and be local to their kids. And you're starting over without this playbook, this log, this backlog of years of data. Where are you starting without having a history of this time frame? I need to be here. Like, how would you start over in that scenario?
Yeah, I love that scenario. That is something that I think about often, and I think about it in this way, is with out of state hunting, right? Like and it's a great example too, is that my daughters are getting older. So like my opportunities to go out of state, like those are changing quite a bit here. But I also, I think about like, yeah, I would like to take 2 or 3 trips in the fall. But boy, I would have to do a lot of out of state scouting if I wanted to hunt the way I do now at my home turf, go do that out of state. And so I did this last year in Kansas. I walked into an area that I've never stepped foot on. It's 13 hours from my house, never been there before. And I went there with an extremely open mind. Just there, I have it's almost like this, Adam. I had no bad habits yet learned there. I have nothing, like you said, like I think that's real. Like even going out of state scouting, like I can make an argument why it's good, and I can make an argument why it's bad too, especially for an area you're not spending a lot of time in. You could go out of state scouting and, you could just love an area, get married to a spot, and show up, 50 weeks later, and it'd be dog shit. And you're only there for a week, but you're so married to that spot that you kind of burned your hunt because of what you seen scouting. And so with say no scouting, that's kind of what I've gravitated to now with out of state is, yeah, I'll give myself 3 good areas. I'm going to drop 3 pins. Okay. And those pins aren't in the exact spot, but they are kind of destination pins. And I'll walk you right through kind of what happened in the Kansas scenario, because Adam, it is something completely different than what I've ever would have done at home, because I would say, I can't do that here. I probably, if I did what I'm about to say, what I did in Kansas, I probably would have never even hunted. I probably would have went back home because I thought I would have wasted it. So in Kansas, with the wind direction I get there on night 1, I have a destination pin. I know I want to get into that area, because there's multiple things coming together. The pin may not be on the X where I need to be, but it's a good area. And I'm walking through all this CRP, and I'm always just drawn to cover. Like, I'm not used to the CRP type ground yet, and I know there's so much value in it, but I haven't been in it enough to really understand it. And I'm looking at this creek bottom that's got all these trees in, and then I'm like, what the hell am I doing walking out here? I need to be walking in there. I drop down in there, and I'm walking along, see a scrape, and I'm standing there looking at the scrape, and I'm kind of I look up to the south, and I can see another scrape, and on that scrape, the tree itself is a cedar tree, and it's shredded, okay? And I'm just, this is 15 minutes. 15 minutes into, lacing my boots up. I don't like, in my mind, I'm like, hey, I'm not even close to where I'm supposed to be. I had a destination in mind, right? What do? Put my bow against the tree, take a picture, pick the bow back up, move along. I'm scouting, get back to my destination. I'm looking around and going, man, I don't think this is it. My gut's not telling me it's it. And it's starting to get darker, and there's probably only 90 minutes of daylight left. And I'm like, well, there's a pond over here. Let me go look at the pond. I'm like, yeah, pond's got a lot of tracks, but I don't know how it's set up in here. And I said, why'd I keep going past the sign that I found? Like, why'd I do that? It's because I had a destination in mind. I had a pre-thought already of where I needed to be. But I just scouted all these creek bottoms. Like, it was so dry in Kansas, like wherever you were in Kansas, like I like, in my mind, I'm like, you probably could have heard me walking where I was. Like, that's how dry it was in Kansas, right? And so I said, I'm on a limited time. I'm basically, just got here. And my thought is always, like, with limited time, like I like hunt with my back against the wall. I said, I'm gonna go right back to that sign. And I'm gonna set up for tomorrow morning there. Tonight's kind of a bust, right? Drove all night, drove all day, got there. Like, my ass was whooped. Here in Michigan, I would have went home, because there's no way in my mind I would think that I can't backtrack. Like, that's the complete opposite what I would ever tell someone to do. Like, I'd be like, if you walk that far, like, you got to be set up that far. You can't go back and hunt a deer. But the sign was there. It wasn't a lot of sign at all. Like, not at all. And I put all my, I saddle hunt, put all my stuff up in that tree, and it was getting dark. I'll be back here tomorrow morning. 20 minutes the next morning, here comes this buck just right up through there, just the way that the train basically would move a deer through there. Come right up through there, through that scrape, shot him. And like, that was kind of like just getting dropped into an area, reading what's going on at the time and now. Most likely, whatever deer was laying that sign down was alive. I wasn't trying to chase an animal that wasn't even there anymore, and I didn't know any bad habits. Would I have killed that deer in Kansas if I had been running 20 trail cameras, and if I went and spent 4 days scouting the year before? I have no idea. I don't know that, or it's the complete opposite. Like, going out of state style of hunting is the complete opposite of what I do in my home state of Michigan. Like, I live here. I should have a pretty good, grip on what's going on. But out of state, man, I think you just gotta dive into it, and you have to have an open mind, because the one thing I've learned talking to a lot of guys, Adam, is that, like, I've said it multiple times tonight, I'm so gravitated to the thick stuff, the thick stuff. I go to these other places and these deer don't have to have the thick stuff. Maybe they're visually using their eyes to their advantage more than just being in thick cover, or maybe the thermals are different and they're using that to their advantage more than the thick stuff is, and I think if you just approach it, don't try to boil the ocean when it comes to e-scouting. Pick yourself. If you're going somewhere, let's say if I had, like you said, I had to go out to Pennsylvania, you gave me a week, I'm going to pick 3 good areas, what look good on the map, and that's hard too. Like, you know, my e-scouting was never like the greatest, and it still probably isn't today, but it's improved. Where if I find 3 spots on the map, they're probably going to be at least decent spots. Those are 3 starting points. I'm not trying to overcomplicate it. I'm going to keep an open mind. I'm going to take some of the information I've learned in Michigan, or if in Iowa or Kansas or wherever I've been, because there may be something in Pennsylvania that I see and I'm like, hey, I've seen that before. I've seen this kind of situation before. But I'm just gonna keep an open mind. I'm gonna dive into those areas, usually 3 areas that I find attractive. And I pretty much can guarantee you those 3 areas are gonna have multiple things coming together. That's usually always that's what I'm looking for. That's where I end up killing that buck in Kansas. That's what it was. Multiple things coming together that I think whitetails they're edge animals, man. And those edges, multiple terrain features, all of that stuff comes together. I don't care where you're at in the country. If you can find it, it's usually going to gravitate some deer movement through there.
So in that same scenario, and you're kind of echoing the way that I feel like I need to start hunting, because I don't have
Knives, machetes, saws, and shears, multi-tools, shovels, swords, axes, spears, hatchets, and tomahawks. If it cuts, snips, slices, or chops, Midway USA has it. Find great gift ideas in our huge selection of pocket knives and other everyday carry folding knives. Make a statement or create a family legacy with one of our top-of-the-line hunting knives. We've got a great selection of manual and electric sharpeners too. For just about everything for the outdoors, check out MidwayUSA.com.
It's done.
Connor McDavid! It's not real!
The goal of the year,
Panarin!
part of the past. The celebrations, forgotten. The history,
Vegas Golden Knights!
history. We're back to a blank slate. Clean ice. All that matters now is what happens next. The Stanley Cup playoffs.
Eastern Conference Final begins Wednesday.
I don't have the, I guess I would say, like, the discipline or the amount of data to say, like, this is where I need to be at this time of year because of this history and because of that. And so what I've said is that I need to start hunting in my home state like I hunt out of state, which is I just keep moving until I find good sign, and I don't want to waste a whole lot of time. But I think one of the things in your scenario, in the way that I hunt out of state and why we hunt out of state and all of these things, is we put ourselves in a rut hunting mentality. So a lot of these times where you have these edges and things like that, we're hunting, you found sign for that scenario and you found the scrapes. And my guess is that you were downwind of those scrapes and that was doe bedding there, and that's why those scrapes were there. And so we're kind of hunting does and we're kind of hunting deer at that point. And we're doing it during the rut or pre-rut where we know these bucks or these animals that we want to kill are like the most active, right? So if you moved to Pennsylvania, say over Memorial Day weekend, and you were going to start to build this playbook for the entire year or for your next decade, how do you start that process of not being able to say, I know I need to be on this piece, this 4 or 5 day window, or this piece? Like, what are your tactics? And I don't even think it's tactics. I think it would probably go along with your podcast and say, like, what is your method to gather that information? Because a lot of guys are in the scenario where maybe they can kill deer during the rut, but early season or late season where it should just be easy, right? That's the easiest time because they're patternable. It's bed to food, bed to food. But if you're not focused on a certain deer, you don't know that there's a big deer there. You know, you're just kind of hunting deer and then you're just kind of running around. Where in the rut, if you can say like myself, I mean, that's why I kill my deer in the rut, is because I can find deer. I can just go out and kill a deer, but can I go out and kill a buck? No, you know, but so if I can find the deer during the rut, then I just have to wait long enough and there's going to be a buck come through there.
Yeah. You know, when you talked about how you said how you'd like to like maybe start hunting that way, or why you travel out of state. I see it, I hear it in guys' stories all the time, you know, or they take a trip to Missouri and they bring a buck home and they're like, man, that was awesome. I think when guys go out on a hunt, I mean, 99% of them, they have a date that they are headed home in. And that's why like I treat Michigan like this too, because of my limited time with kids. That's what's always with the limit, is hunting. Like, guys hunt with their back against the wall. And the same as you, like when you guys go out of state, dude, you guys is like from the minute you put your feet on that dirt, wherever it may be, that clock's ticking for when you got to go home. And you kind of like, you know, when you're back against the wall, it's like, okay, we're gonna find out who we really are. You know what I mean? Where it's like we kind of we loosen up that collar a little bit, and we probably try things that we probably, you know, at home it's like, oh, I got all season, maybe I shouldn't do that just yet. I quit doing that. Like even in Michigan, where I have like this thought in my mind. It's either like I will kill that buck, or he'll probably end up living 5 miles away because I'm gonna scare him so bad. Like that is my, like, I don't tippy toe, because I'll just go, you know, I've built this catalog where I'll go hunt another buck usually. And I know there's probably a lot of people are like, that's not right. You know, like, you're not gonna kill him if you scare him. But it's like, well, it's most of the time I'm gonna kill him. But like I said, if I don't, he's probably gonna be long gone. But you know, to answer your question about if I'm headed to PA, it's Memorial Weekend, and you know, we're not talking about an out of state hunt. We're talking about moving there. That there's no doubt, you know, if I'm moving to PA and I'm only hunting PA this fall, there's no doubt I'd feel like I was way behind. But what I would do is I would tear it apart, and I would do the same thing. If we're in Pennsylvania, we're probably talking about hill country, and I would start picking drainages. Now, this is the part I don't know what way I would lean, because I've never been in that situation. There's two thoughts in my mind. I would start picking drainages, you know, like right off the bat, I'd start picking like drainage systems that set up for early season, right? So that those southwest winds, you know. So then I'm thinking about like what points would they be better on early. What I could look for is you know, mass trees or really good browse. Like maybe I could do that. But what I don't know what I would do here is, you know, it's Memorial Weekend, like you said, so we're already on limited time. Do I pick like just a couple really big drainage systems that, like, you know, like, hey, these are giant systems, like there could be multiple bucks that are using them, and try to really learn those all the way up until hunting season? Or would I pick smaller ones that I could learn more of them? That's what I don't know. See, I like having, you know, my playbook is I like having a mixture of big, like big swamps, big pieces, sprinkled in with smaller pieces too. Because then those smaller pieces are like, I can get in there, I can scout them, one scout, and I'm done. And I know if a buck's in there, I know there's only one place to be in there. And so if I'm in PA and I'm in a, like I've never even been out there to really know what it's like, that would be my question. Would on limited time, do I want to learn just one or two, three really big drainage systems with the ridges and multiple fingers? The more, the better out there in that kind of country, or just smaller ones where I could say, well, I got 10 of these, two of these probably have to hit for me. I don't know what I would do there. What would you pick out of those two scenarios? What one do you think you would gravitate towards?
Well, I think in that scenario, like because of like our background, I think from Michigan and a couple of the spots that I've chosen to hunt more recently, because you talked about an area where you had a piece of private with 14 trucks on it. So pressure to me is like, even, our property in the UP is 240 acres, but you put 10 guys on it and now you're hemmed up with neighbors on three sides. That 240 sounds like a dream come true until you got the wrong wind and everybody's walking with the wind at their back, pushing every single deer out of the property, and you can't tell them that they can't do that. So I would probably gravitate towards the biggest piece of property, and then I would probably try to locate, and I wouldn't even say, I guess I have a different, take on it than you, but you're more successful than me. So maybe I need to adjust, but I would like to get eyes on an actual animal. So I would want to figure out a place where I could go in and glass and kind of look and see, or even set up the trail cameras on some area to verify that something was in there, that I was right. Simply because, like you said, the whole, trying to take this giant piece, but I feel like the smaller pieces, if you don't have a multitude of them, they get, no matter the size, relatively speaking, a little bit of pressure makes that piece very, very small. So I would want to make sure, not just saying, well, there should be a bunch of animals in here. I would want to verify that. Yeah. And that's something that I'm slowly working towards here in Michigan, is that I don't know, like a utopian hunter, I guess. Like, I love being surprised that I mean, what do they say? Comparison is a thief of joy, right? So if every time I go in the woods, I see every deer, if I don't have a picture of it, when I don't know, I'm just looking at the sign and I'm just saying, okay, there should be a deer here. When one pops up, man, if it gets me excited, like, I'm going to shoot him. If I got to think about it, or if I got to, if I got to think, well, maybe not. But if a 120-inch buck walks out, and in like your scenario in Kansas, if a 110-inch buck walks out, but you've got a 140, a 150, a 160 on camera, you might have come home empty-handed because, you didn't get an opportunity at those deer or whatever. And so I love being surprised, but I'd also like to make sure that I knew that there were deer where I was hunting. So, but I think I would pick the biggest spot, and what I would do is I would want to make sure that I would get eyes on some sort of creature that I wanted to put my tag on.
Yeah, and that would be, you got to think, if we show up Memorial Weekend, they're starting to grow their antlers, so we're going to be able to tell. But if we got in the right, say the right bottom, or something that had a creek and that had a crossing, and we could cut that track, and we could be like, Adam, look, like this is a good deer. I can't promise what he has on his head, but this looks like a kind of deer that we would like to be in here and try to hunt, But even though I said we would be behind showing up on Memorial Day, you still got June, July, August. I think PA is probably an October opener. So we got September, got 4 months that we can put some solid work in. I mean, you could really, if you designated some, like a day a week, 2 days a week, or whatever the case may be, 2 half days a week, or whatever it may be, you could definitely do it. But I would definitely start with the thought of that early season in mind, like, because once early season starts, you're in a tree, and then you have, like you talked about verifying an animals there. If I'm doing some scouting for early season, it puts me in a tree, and then I can start kind of maybe seeing how the animals are moving. Maybe I'm just off. Maybe I'm 60 yards off in the hill country. Maybe I didn't set up quite right, but the part that I think would be very, very important about if you were to move to Pennsylvania, and I hear it a lot, is, you hear guys talk about hill country, about those little places that aren't on the map. If you could get yourself a handful of those places in the summertime, boy, it would be nice. And you brought up glassing, and I don't know if, in that part of Pennsylvania where, like, the cameras may be way more beneficial than glassing. And that would be a big adjustment too, because, like, I spend a lot of time in the summer leading out all the way up to hunting season behind glass. And you take that away, that would be a big difference, but yeah, I think you could definitely learn, like we talked about earlier, right? That first question about what's kind of going on during green up, you could learn the way of the land out there for sure. You could learn how the drainages flow. Maybe they're steeper than what you thought. Oh, here's this little micro bench I didn't see on the map. You could learn a lot about that land. And then basically once that hunting season rolled around, then you're starting to get some tree time in, and you're visually seeing animals move, and then you're adjusting to them because you have a general idea of how that land flows out there.
Yeah, my main thing with that was for guys who don't have years and years of, like, and they feel like they're starting over, or that they're behind the curve, or that they're doing everything wrong, to try and start fresh. Like, and I guess this would be a good question, is like, you have had to, over the years, have picked up some things that are bad habits that you've had to shake or had to adjust, like you said, with the looking at old rubs and things like that. So for guys who have these bad habits and want to move on, and they want to be more successful, what do you think, like, for yourself as a timeline as you go through the year, how they can just say, if I just focus on this now, this then, and I guess one thing that you can kind of lead into this too, because I feel like I already know the answer, but like, when is your favorite time to kill a deer? Like, if you're like, okay, I have to be in a tree these times,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of month by month leading up to that.
Yeah. So you want my favorite time to kill right off the bat?
Yep.
So, but my answers actually kind of changed on this. Okay, and this is from years and years and years of just watching deer and seeing trail camera pictures. I think I know this is probably going to sound super unpopular. I think October 14th through 19th is arguably one of the best freaking times to kill not just a deer. I think it's one of the best times to kill the biggest deer in your area. And like we've been talking about these windows. Okay. Why I believe that is because I think that's kind of the real first time that some of the most mature does in your area are coming into heat. Okay. Like as we record today, okay, seen a fawn today, up and on its feet, running pretty good. I can tell it's been born a couple of days. So plus or minus, that's right around October 26th. Okay, that's not too uncommon. I found one 2 years ago on May 4th. That puts an October 15th breeding day if it was born the day I found it. But trail cameras have really opened my eyes to it. The SD card cameras on scrapes right outside bedding areas. I mean, it's wild. Like if someone said, "I will give you $5,000 to put me on the biggest Michigan buck that you know about this next year," I would say, "Come during these dates, and I'll find you one." Like that is, I think that's it. But you just you got to have the right spot for it, right? Like not every spot is heating up like that. You have to have the exact, like, to me, like you have to have the scrape in that square mile next to the best bedding area. Because what I think is actually happening, I think the oldest, most mature doe is going into those areas and pulling those bucks out of there. We're not talking about November 8th chasing. We're not talking like that. Like I think the doe herself, she's pulling she's picking what buck she wants to be bred by, and she's pulling them out of those bedding areas and hitting those. I've got videos of it. Come out, hit these scrapes, and it's just like, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's October 14th. What are they doing? Well, if you have those trail cameras on video mode, you'll see you'll see why they're doing that, But yeah, that window right there, Adam. I know it's not a super popular answer, but for what I'm doing here, that's a hot time. But for if you're a guy traveling out of state, shit, you take, I think, October 23rd on through, middle of November. If you're just looking for a good hunt, that's what I do. I mean, that's a lot of times when I'm traveling. That's when I'll hit the road. I'm not hunting a specific animal. I don't even know what kind of animal is usually there most of the time. I know I'm in a generally good area that will hold one that I'd like to shoot. But like we talked, like that's the opposite of what we do in our home state, right? Like we know these deer in our home state that we're kind of chasing.
And that's why I'm asking for the home state, right? So if you're starting today and you're planning on killing October 16th, like what is your timeline to, like, A, find the property, B, locate the deer, and then, next to say, okay, I'm going to kill on this day. Like, what are the steps leading up to that? So for a guy who's feels like he's doing all the wrong things, or he's wasting his time, or he's the world's worst bow hunter, cough, cough, he, to put yourself in that position, like, what are the steps that you take to do so?
Yeah. Do you want to paint a picture of like we're just getting a brand new property? Like,
Yeah.
Say it's a piece we don't know anything about. Okay. Let's say we just knocked on the door and we just picked up a brand new 39-acre tract. Okay. And maybe it's got a mixture, a little bit of everything here in Michigan. Maybe it's got a little bit of swamp on it, a little bit of hardwoods, openness, and maybe some young timber, or the type of timber where it's not canopied out too much, so there's a lot of undergrowth and there's not maybe very good trees to kind of hunt in. Well, it's 39 acres, and depending on how thick it is, it's going to take maybe a couple days to really learn it. But when I hear 39 acres, I think in my mind, I'm like, I can cover all of this. Like I should be able to look on every side of the tree on this place. Like we can really break this down. But somewhere on that 39 acres, Adam, I believe there's probably a tree that, if there's a mature buck on that property, that there's a tree on there that he probably walks by more than any other tree on that piece. And it's probably going to be this 39 acres. I broke down that there's probably some swamp in there, and he's probably going to be bedding either in the swamp, depending on what that looks like inside of there, or right on that edge of that swamp, right kind of where he feels safe. And if it's a brand new piece, and I like, this is exactly what I'd be doing. I'd walk the whole thing. And then honestly, what I'd be doing, if I didn't find the scrape, like the scrape that, like it's obvious, I'm going to build one. I'm going to build a scrape right outside whatever I believe that I found for his bedding area. And I'm going to build that scrape right on that junction of the trails exiting and paralleling that bedding area. And I'm going to put a camera on there. And I'm going to do that. I'll build a scrape right now. Whether you have to, there's multiple options of ways you can build a scrape. Or traditional licking branch, a vine. You could get a flagpole holder off of Amazon and put it on the side of a tree and put your licking branch in that. Like, it doesn't matter to me how you do it. You just got to have it in the right spot. I think you could be somewhat a piss poor scrape maker if it's in the right location. It's still probably going to do pretty good for you. But if you're a really good scrape maker and in the right location, it's going to be dynamite. But what we're going to do is we're going to put this right outside his bedding area, right on that junction. Because what I want to do is I want to put that scrape in between me. I mean, it's going to be me, the scrape, and then that bedding area. Because I believe what's going to happen is when he stands up from his bed, hopefully October 16th, if a doe, we'll take the doe out of the equation. If he stands up out of his bed, Adam, either he's going to stand right on that edge of that security zone. In his mind, he's got this security buffer on the edge of his bedding. And this is that location where, if you ever seen it, a mature buck, he'll stand there and his ears will be going back and forth. Like he's just listening. And he'll lick his nose a few times and he's refreshing all those senses. Like he's trying to pick up any type of danger. Maybe 2 or 3 other, deer already exit the bedding and he's watching to see what their body reaction is. He's kind of watching to see what they're doing. And he's looking at that scrape, right? He can visually see this scrape because when I build this scrape for him, it's going to be visually attractive too. Like I'm going to make a big scrape. It's going to be really, really big. And I want that scrape to be his first stop when he decides to exit that bedding. Like it's got to be that close to him. And that right there, that is, to me, that's trapping that buck right there. Because he's gonna, you'll know in the summertime, you'll know if he's there. And you're gonna know if you build that scrape right in the right location, he'll be using it. He'll be using that scrape.
How close to his bed? And do you have to know that? Because what you had said earlier is you're looking at these swamps as bedding areas, and that he's bedded somewhere in there. And we've got a junction that is parallel. It's where the deer are coming out, and you're assuming that big track, that buck is coming out of that swamp or that bedding area. And then you've got the other trail that's paralleling it, like to wind check it or whatever. How close does it need to be? And do you need to know exactly where his bed is, Dan Infalt, watch him stand up style, or is it just need to be within X amount of yards?
Yep. Great question. So one of my biggest mistakes I made, 10, 12 years ago is I thought I needed to know that exact bed, like that Dan Infalt style. And he's really good at it. And I think that right there is really good. Like I see that kind of bedding, that exact one particular bed in the swamps that have islands inside the swamps. Not all of my swamps have that. What a lot of my swamps do have, Adam, is that they have like all this red brush in there. And I don't even know what they look like, some kind of tree, but they're bent over. Like if you took the McDonald's arches and you cut them in half and it's just one, like they'll be like, that will be in a swamp and it'll be real dry underneath of it. And he'll bed up against that, but there'll be multiple of them. Like in a swamp, there could be 9 of those beds in there, like a big swamp. I can't tell you exactly what bed he's going to be on, but I can tell you that he's going to be in there. Now, so to know the exact bed, I don't have to know that. But I do, what I do want to know is if he is in that swamp. And most of the time, it's very rare, but there are pieces that I hunt that may have adjoining swamps almost right by each other, maybe only 80 yards from each other. And then it's kind of like, oh, is he over here or is he over here? And it's not always just, based off the wind either, because those swamps, like it's so hard to penetrate those and not get busted. So that's why I'm always kind of on that edge. And what I see is well, I don't see it because they're so thick, but I can hear them sloshing through the waters. Is I can hear him coming towards me, and then he stops on the edge, and that is when I'll be locked in with my binoculars, and that's when I'll catch him right on the edge, standing there, like I talked about, shifting his ears and licking his nose. And I would say there's no hard answer here because there we have an issue that changes all the time in swamp country is the water level. Okay. You give me a dry summer, I'm going to push that scrape as tight to that edge as I can get, real tight. Like right now in Michigan, we're dealing with the swamps are pretty full right now. And I don't know if they can change because they've been rising for about 2 years. I haven't seen them dry. Oh man, 2021 was the last time I seen them real dry, and so it's 3 years now, and so sometimes I have to adjust. But if you watch, the deer are kind of adjusting with those also because they don't want to have to just walk in the water all the time. Those parallel trails may get pushed a little bit, but there's also other factors. Pressure being the number one. That's first off, that's why they're even in there is the pressure because they may not be in there like all summer long. So it's hard to give you a true like how far off that swamp edge do I want that scrape, but I have a rough number. I would say anywhere between 75 yards to like 150 yards. 150 is pretty far. Like that's if it's 150 yards off that swamp edge, it better not be open timber. Like we got to have some understory in there. But if there's understory, that means it's probably not flooded. That means I can probably push a little bit closer. But the reason I can get close with these is because of how thick these swamps are. I'm not dealing with a deer like in hill country. I've heard guys talk about where it's like, yeah, dude, he could see me from like 250 yards away. Not here. That's not the case. Even their hearing. And if as long as you don't break that buffer of that security buffer of theirs in that swamp, if you don't break that, they even have a hard time hearing it because they're deep in that. They got grass. That grass is kind of usually, unless it's extremely calm day, it's always kind of moving around. But like I can hear them sloshing through the water when they're coming towards me. I can 9 out of 10 times I can hear them before I can see them. But yeah, so I would say 75 to, I don't even want to say 150. I kind of want to take it down a little bit. It's 75 to, 125 yards, 115 yards, kind of right in there. Like I said, he's got to feel safe. I think he somewhat has to be able to see that from his security edge. He wants to be able to see it. And a lot of times, if the wind's just right, you're hunting that just off wind, depends on what exit trail he comes out of. Maybe sometimes he can smell that. Sometimes he can smell that before he exits because that's something I've been watching. If a buck's hitting it, say in the morning, and then he doesn't hit it that evening, it's because I think he's closer to that scrape than what I ever thought he maybe was because I think he knows that no deer hit that during the day. But if you get another deer, any random deer to hit a scrape during the day, right outside his security zone, whether he heard it, smelled it, well, he probably can't see it unless he's laying really close. If he's that close, then I can't even get in there and hunt him.
I'm Will Cooper, and you're listening to HuntStand's Make Your Mark podcast on the Waypoint Podcast Network. Stick around as I bring you more stories and interviews from veteran hunters and industry professionals who inspire us all to be better equipped in the woods and in life. I'm Will Cooper, host of HuntStand's Make Your Mark podcast. For even more content, be sure to watch the original films from HuntStand Presents on the Waypoint TV channel every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern. Visit waypointtv.com to learn more.
But if he smelled it, a deer hit it, or if he heard it, like, you can bet his ass is probably coming right back up to that scrape that night.
So when you talked about pressure and whether you're dealing with other hunters on this 39 acres that you're talking about, or if you're on public and you're making one of these scrapes, like what, and I guess specifically on public, you're making this big, giant, visibly enticing scrape. Isn't that attracting other hunters? Isn't that bringing attention to a spot?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be, I mean, a lot of times these scrapes, Adam, the way they look, like, there's no doubt. Like, if I come across them, I'm absolutely a human made those. But I just have this thought. It's like, if I don't try, then I'll never know, right? Like, we circle back to it. I've got this giant catalog. If you find one of my scrapes on public, like, okay, like, I'll pivot. I'll go to a different one, you know. The thing with public is, you know, a lot of times they don't get opened up real big till almost go time, you know. Like, if they're on private, dude, those things will be wide open year round for me. I'll have those things wide open, you know, visually attractive to them. But yeah, if you don't try things, you don't know, you know what I mean? Like, if I always thought, like, well, if I build this, other people might find it, then if I don't build it, I'll never know. Like, I'll never know what's there. Or, you know, I try things. I keep an extremely open mind when it comes to hunting whitetails. I try to be better. I was very closed-minded in my younger years.
That's awesome. And you know, I get it. I've been in situations where I've walked up on something and you're like, oh man, that looks really cool. And then you start looking around and you're like, okay, all right, I see what's going on here. I mean, there was one that I walked up on and I was like, man, it was a scrape line, you know, and there's this huge scrape, and I was looking at it and I was like, oh, that's freaking awesome. And then I'm looking around, I'm like, there's got to be a camera around here. Yeah. And this camera was like 30 feet up in a tree. I'm not even exaggerating. It was like higher than I could get with my climbing sticks. I was like looking up there and I was like, oh my God. I was like, kudos, give the guy a thumbs up. But I was like, wow.
Yeah. You know what's wild too, though, is these scrapes have kind of just enticed, like, they made the spot better. Like, these areas that I talk about making a scrape, honestly, I would hunt them without the scrape, because you know, like we talked, this is the junction outside of that bedding. You know, this is the entry and exit. This is kind of like their first place once they step outside that security cover, and it's kind of that last place they stop right before they go into the security cover. Adding that scrape there is just a little bit like extra, you know, sweetener for them, basically.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be kind of going back at my on my maps and looking at my pins and looking for these, you know, junctures and all of the stuff. Because I mean, as you're talking about this, I can visualize stuff, and so I think the listeners are going to get a ton of information, you know, from this. What going forward, like, what have you got on your agenda for this year? Because you're usually all over the place, right?
Yeah, well, honestly, man, it's I haven't done a ton of travel hunting over the years. I drew an Iowa tag back in 2020 and did that, and had an absolute blast, build my points back up for that. But you know, I've always pretty much stuck close to home over the years, and that's kind of where my passion for trying to kill, the biggest animals I could find in Michigan, that my kids, like I didn't want to hit the road, I didn't want to miss anything they did. And, they have such a busy schedule that it was, I ran them here, my wife ran them here, I picked them up, my wife picked them up. It was always kind of go, 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 right? To school, from school, to dance, from dance, do this, do that. It was busy, right? Like I always used to tell my buddies, I'm like, dude, running kids around is like that. It's more work than actually going to work for the day. Like that's what it always felt like. But having those kids, it kept me in Michigan, and I knew I needed to figure out a way to chase my passion in my own home state. But what it also did was made me be efficient, right? Like try to kill things is on very short windows, so that's why I probably talked about windows so much. As I scout, oh gosh dang, if I looked at my logbook, I'd probably say for every eight days of scouting is 1 day of hunting. So with all that said though, boy, my life has changed a lot in this last month. My oldest daughter, she's driving now, so like as we speak, on a day like today, they leave for school, and I give them a hug and kiss and tell them I love them and have a good day. And I'm like, okay, so there they go. Like I don't have to take them to school. Then after school, they come home on their own, and then they drive themselves up to dance practice, and they drive themselves home. And I'm like, holy cow, like this is different. And my oldest daughter, she got 2 more years of high school left after this year, so I'm gonna take advantage of these next couple of years. And still, obviously, I won't, I refuse to miss anything of theirs, so that's always like standard number one. But I think I'm gonna do some more travel hunting. I would like to probably do two to three trips this year, but they don't have to be long trips. I'm okay with that. I like that concept of hunting with your back against the wall. I've always looked up to Andy May a lot, and I've talked to him quite a bit. And if you watch, like how he's always taking those short 3 to 4 day trips, I look at him like, dude, the guy's hunting with his back against the wall, man, and he just just tries it, right? Like you listen to him talk, and he's like, I screw up a lot of hunts, but it's like, yeah, but he's having all those encounters because he's trying things, right? Like can't be afraid to fail, like same as that question you asked me, like, well, would you be worried about somebody finding it? Or it's like, okay, but what if they do? Then I'll just keep going. Like I'm not afraid. I don't like failing, but I'm not afraid of it. So that's kind of this next fall. Maybe kick it off in September somewhere. And I would like to maybe also do something late November. I've never done anything in late November outside of Michigan, and I think I might try that. But my season's always kind of short because I always end up on the beach come middle of December. My family and we always end up, we got a place down in Siesta Key that I think this year we're booked for like 16 days down there, and I don't have any problem at all cutting my season short because they let me have at it quite a bit in the off season too. Like they actually think that hunting season's pretty easy compared to the off season. But I'll be I still, Michigan is such a passion for me. I just absolutely love trying to find the like kind of that top 1 or 2 or 3% style buck here in Michigan. You never know what you might find, and hopefully kill one of those. That's always like going out of state and hunting better states than Michigan. That's awesome, but I take Michigan. It's pretty high priority for me. So that's kind of what I got going on here in the this next fall. But I mean, we're knocking on velvet season, man. And I tell you what, I love velvet season, man, because like I always have this uh ambition to, I know it sounds stupid because I don't like, score doesn't bother me. I don't care about it, but it's always just it's a good way to reference an animal, right? I always see how if I can find a 150-inch deer not in Michigan. I used to have according to my logs, it used to take me about once every 5 years to be able to find one and have the chance to hunt one. And now I've kind of shortened that down to about every 3 years. And it actually went in 2021, I found one. In this last year, I found one, but I killed the one in 21, but this last year, I couldn't do anything to get permission to hunt this other one. So, but that's covering a lot of ground, though. Covering a lot of ground. A little advice for anyone out there that's loves summer scouting. Don't ever get a new vehicle right beforehand, and because like your wife will be like, God, you put that many miles on because it's fresh, right? Like she knows it was at zero. She knows it was at zero, and it's like all summer long, and it's just like, really for deer, But yeah, I'm looking forward to velvet season, man.
And then can you tell us, what you got going on over with the podcast and kind of like, what is the topic and kind of like the mission statement over there with the Method podcast?
Yeah, for sure. So the Method podcast is pretty new. That just launched in the beginning of March, and it's a little bit different than most podcasts. It's an every other week episode. I don't do it for a living or anything like that, and the guys at Latitude kind of approached me about hosting a podcast for them, and I'll be honest, like I'm a podcast junkie, man. I think I started probably listening to podcasts probably like 12 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. I mean, way back. I mean, I remember like when Wired to Hunt started, like way back in the day, and just never had any like real desire to have my own podcast. Like that was never a thing, and I was actually really, really worried about ever speaking on one because a couple things. One, I don't think I'm a great talker. I'm too passionate and I get rambling on and probably talk too much. But then I was also extremely, extremely, extremely worried about other people finding out about what I was doing. Like that was a real issue with in the very beginning when I was ever a guest on a podcast. But the one thing, Adam, is been so eye-opening, and I know you're going to understand this all too well, is when you have guys reach out to you after listening to you and ask questions and just whether it's a complicated question or it's a simple question, it's like it's intriguing to me because he's just wanting to learn, right? And I was there too. I still am. I still ask questions today, right? And I loved that part of it. Like I loved seeing a guy trying to figure something out. And then all of a sudden he's messaging you in April, asking a few questions. And then he, most of the time they always end with, okay, good luck this fall. And then all of a sudden it's October 21st. And you got a message and you open it up and you're like, oh yeah, I remember this guy. And he just got a picture of a deer and he's like, hey, look what I got. And he's like, the fact that one, he applied himself to the information. Awesome. And then like, he thought of you to be like, hey, I want to show him this deer. Check. That's been super gratifying to me. So when, the guys at Latitude, they kind of talked to me about it. I like the part of being part of something with those guys. I believe in what those guys stand for. Very like-minded. I've been around them quite a bit, well before this started. And then came along the naming part, right? Like, what are we going to name this thing? And I had some ideas and they just didn't sound well as a name. And what was really important to me was that the one thing I've always recognized about whitetail hunting is everyone has a different method, and it should be, right? Like we can sit here tonight and bounce ideas off each other, but until we hunt the exact same property together, our methods should be a little bit different. Like we were talking about 39 acres. If you have 39 acres and I have 39 acres, they're two totally different pieces. So we have to approach them differently. Your family situation's different than mine. Like we all have different methods, whether you're public land or private land, whether you're a tree stand hunter or a saddle hunter, all of that stuff, I do not care. You know what I mean? I care that you have a passion. Hell, I don't even care if your passion's whitetail hunting. I just care that you have a passion. But when it comes to whitetail hunting, I think every guy's got a different method. And I just like talking to guys about that. And I'm not a real buttoned up guy. You're not going to get that from me. I like stories. I think there's a lot of learning points in stories. You know, you hear a guy talk about a story, and then you're like, whoa, wait a second. Well, why'd you take that entry route? Wasn't the wind wrong? But then he'll be like, yeah, but the way the train flowed, it allowed me to get away with it. You're like, okay. Like, and on top of it, not to be too greedy or anything, but it's like, I get to continue to learn, man. Like, I've just always considered myself a student of the game. I don't ever want to stop thinking that. Like, in my opinion, if I stop thinking like I can't learn anymore, then I'll probably start declining in hunting, and that's not what I want either. But yeah, so every other Wednesday, it's Latitudes the Method podcast. I host it. I have on an array of guests as we speak right now. I don't know when this will launch. We've had 6 episodes. I've got a lot banked up, a lot of guys banked up. Plan on doing some in-person stuff coming up, and I talk to guys that you've heard before, and I talk to guys that have never ever been on a podcast before that I've just known and got to know through hunting over the last couple of years, basically. So yeah, Latitudes the Method podcast.
Awesome. I've really enjoyed it. And, both, you get to hear from guys that you definitely know, and a few guys that that don't do podcasts, but they have enough history with David and enough respect for him that they're like, yeah, of course we'll do it for you. And then you've got guys where you never heard of them before, and you're like, oh my God, this guy's season was incredible. Like, holy cow. Yeah. And it's a fresh take because, doing this for, the last 5 years, there's almost like a circuit of guys where, I remember on the fall podcast, like Aaron and I dropped a podcast with Greg Litzinger on the exact same day, like same guest, same day. And, now Greg's a friend of mine, so I can call him up whenever. And that's been a great portion of it too. But getting those fresh ideas and the fresh takes and, hearing about guys, and especially guys like yourself, or that, I guess, that share the same sentiment of maybe they don't want to tell their story. They don't want people to know who they are, but they have a ton of information to give. And, you're able to pull that out of them really well. So you guys should definitely go check that out. And David, I just want to say thank you. It's always fun, catching up with you, but you have got a lot to offer, and I think guys are going to get a lot out of this podcast. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Adam, for having me on, man. And like I said, I probably got long-winded. I go down giant rabbit holes, but hey, guess what? That's what's fun about podcasts, right? Like if you have a podcast and you're like, okay, I've got 10 things, and then you look at the list and you're like, we went down 3 because the rabbit holes are so big. But that's why I enjoy it, right? Because that's how you get the little bit of information out of guys that you normally don't get. But I appreciate you having me on, and probably see you up at TAC this year, or what?
Yeah, 100%. Yep, we'll be up there, yep, we've got a house. We'll have the cookout. We're doing all the same stuff as last year, so definitely be up there.
Cool, man. Sounds good. Thanks again, Adam.
Yep, not a problem.
Every once in a while, it's fun to go like just full-blown redneck on these fish. This is like high-tech cane pole fishing right here.
From the white sandy beaches to the crystal blue waters, enjoy the best fishing Panama City Beach has to offer during Chasing the Sun. Sundays at 9:30 a.m. Eastern on Waypoint TV, the destination for outdoor entertainment. A life that has the stories to back it. A life to be proud of. It's a Winchester life.
Yeah, baby. 6'8" Western. Oh, mule deer, baby, right there.
Tune in every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern on Waypoint TV.